Good afternoon, subscribers, and welcome back. So I'm here to bring you an updated themes video. So that's paper 3, themes paper for the exam, which is of course after the half-term break. We break for half-term this week, so we've got a week off, and then you're back for themes. I have here the A-level micro paper and the A-level macro paper, and you can see that I've been busy doing these myself, just having a little work through them. I think the general consensus, certainly from my students, has been that the micro data questions with regard to the labour market and income distribution, my students found those quite difficult, whereas the macro data questions on globalisation, government budget, corporate tax rates, development economics, that was a little bit more straightforward, they felt. And then with regard to the essays, certainly again from my students' point of view, again they found that the essays on the micro were pretty tricky, particularly the second set where you had division of labour and horizontal integration, and the macro essays were a little bit more straightforward. And of course, what was on the macro paper, the financial sector. So that might be the last that we see of the financial sector on this particular exam series, but don't take my word for that, I've no inside line on this. So, what I'd like to do today is to just kind of update this document, which is in a Dropbox link, and I'll put a link below and you can find that. And this is just my thoughts as to what might appear on the themes paper in, 10 days time, something like that. So, I've gone through, so this sort of takes us up to where the original document that I uploaded, where I was considering what might be on the paper, but that was before we saw the contents of these particular papers. And I said, maybe you'd see labour market, commodities, market structures, and if it was more a macro emphasis, you'd see unemployment and international trade. Now, I think, certainly, given the case study content in paper 1, we could rule out the labour market, hence the red shading on that. And there was also quite a lot on market structures, so we had monopolistic competition, we had horizontal integration where you could get into market structures, we had contestable markets where you could get into market structures. And it's always a very popular area, isn't it, for assessment, but maybe, I'm just going to say, I'm going to rule that one out here. So that leaves us, from my original sort of predictions, thoughts, commodity markets maybe, and demand and supply, that sort of thing, and then on the macro unemployment. Now, I've revised this in light of what's here, and I'll just talk to you a little bit about the revisions and why I've made those revisions. So let me just scroll this down a little bit. Okay, so on the micro paper, so the most recent one, the one that you did this week, the case study was on labour market and income distribution. You had essays on consumer and producer surplus in relation to rent controls. You had contestable markets, division of labour, horizontal integration. Now that, if you then look back in your micro specification, you will find that the big topic areas therefore yet to be assessed would be economic systems and resource allocation, so your transition economies, your market economy, your planned economy. Supply and demand with regard to a specific market, and remember that was one of the things which I had thought originally, so I'm very much going to leave that in there. Elasticities, so I haven't really seen anything on that at all yet. Objectives of firms, maybe that ties in too much with market structures and maybe that's less likely to appear. And then market failure and government intervention. Now, market failure, government intervention, just think of all the work that you can do on that. Negative externalities, positive externalities, all the diagrams, all the interventionist policies. Now, obviously, you've had that a little bit with the rent controls issue, but maybe that is a big area which is yet to be assessed in full. So it's a lovely area, that, isn't it? Knowing your negative, positive externality diagrams, that's a really nice area, I think, to assess. On the macro paper, paper 2, which is out yesterday, case study, globalisation, government budgets, corporation taxes, foreign direct investment, and then a bit on development economics. Might be nice to hopefully see the back of development, in my view. The essays were on Private sector investment, impact on government objectives, welfare and income equality, economic growth and happiness, and then the financial sector's contribution to the UK economy. Thank goodness I spent with my students the last sort of 3-4 weeks looking at financial markets and researching that and getting together some nice quotes and so on. So hopefully that's gone well for my students who've done that, and obviously anyone out there in the interweb who's done that as well. Now, big topic areas left to be assessed leaves unemployment. Now, unemployment. Given that the micro section was so heavily weighted on labour markets, maybe that's a bit unlikely to, unemployment feature again when we've had such a big chunk of labour market economics. Inflation. Have we seen anything on inflation? Monetary policy. Seen anything on that? No, we've seen plenty on fiscal in your paper too. International trade. Have we had international trade? Well, we've had sort of development in trade, exchange rates, and then maybe the financial sector. Maybe it's the case that you'll get more than simply an essay on financial sector. I think, thinking about this, maybe you would get a question which might relate to the market structure of the financial, so the banking system. Maybe you could get a market structures question on that. But again, you have been hit quite hard already in the market structures area. So let's then see what that leaves us with. So those of you who've been following these videos, you'll know that there's been a sort of micro-macro emphasis from one year to the next. So I'm thinking if the micro-emphasis, and if it is very much a micro-emphasis on the case study in the themes paper this year, then areas you might want to give that little bit extra to might be economic systems and resource allocation, supply and demand analysis, and then that could tie in that whole notion of elasticities again, which is yet to be assessed. With regard to a specific market, maybe the commodities market, we've already seen something on housing. So you've got your elasticities tying in there. And obviously the market failure, the externalities, the pollution. Plastics is very much in the news, isn't it, at the moment? Who knows? And then on the macro, if it's a macro sort of weighted kind of thing, then maybe inflation, monetary policy in the financial sector. Now that seems to me to just tie in really beautifully, doesn't it? Just those three things together: inflation, monetary policy, role of financial sector. So maybe that's something to look into. So ladies and gents, that's my best guess. I hope it's gone well for you so far, and do get in touch in the next days if you've got any further questions, as many of you have been already. I love getting back to you and supporting you, so keep working hard, ignore the sunshine, and keep revising. Bye for now.